Hello, and welcome to the Pivot Table series for Microsoft Excel. Pivot tables in Excel are a versatile reporting tool that makes it easy to extract information from large tables of data without using formulas. Pivot tables are extremely powerful yet user-friendly tool. We can use pivot tables to gain a greater insight into our data. We can use this powerful tool to calculate, summarize, and analyze data that lets you see comparisons, patterns, and trends. Today, we will insert and name our first pivot table. We will also take a look at our layout options. Please open the Pivot Table worksheet and go to the Basics tab to follow along in this lesson. Here we are on our spreadsheet, and before we begin to insert our pivot table, I would like to discuss the data layout. So let's go ahead and discuss the rules of setting up your data. Rule number 1. Your data should be set up in a rectangular style. Rule number 2. Your categories should be established as a column and not as a row. And rule number 3. You want to make sure to insert a column heading for each column. And finally, you want to always ensure that your data is free of formulas, subtotals, formatting, and blanks. Okay, and so now that we have established our rules, let's go ahead and take a look at our options for inserting a pivot table. Okay, so for our first example, we're going to select a range within our data, and we're going to insert it on our existing worksheet. Let's go ahead and select cell A1, and let's go ahead and drag it down to cell E50. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and say insert. I'm going to say pivot table. Now the pop-up will ask you if you would like to insert it on a new worksheet or would you like to insert your pivot table on the existing worksheet. I'm going to go ahead and say existing worksheet. I'm going to select this arrow, and I'm going to go ahead and select the cell where I would like my pivot table to be placed. And I'm going to go ahead and place it in cell I5. I'm going to give my drop down arrow, and then I'm going to simply say OK. And what you are viewing is the beginning of your pivot table. Now let's go ahead and give this pivot table a name. Let's head up to our ribbon, and right under the File tab, you will see a category titled Pivot Table Name. Let's go ahead and select the field, and we'll just call this Pivot Table 1. Okay, so now let's take a look at another option for inserting a pivot table. Let's go ahead and place our mouse inside of any cell on the table. Let's select Insert, and let's go ahead and select Pivot Table. Okay, so if you look at the data range, Excel has assumed that we are selecting all the data on our worksheet because we did not indicate otherwise. Okay? So let's go ahead and select new worksheet this time, and let's go ahead and say OK. Okay, so now as you can see, Excel has inserted a pivot table on a new worksheet as indicated. Okay, so now I would like to pause to discuss the fields included with the pivot table. This includes filters, columns, rows, and values. Now your row and your column is basically the layout of what your data will look like once it's added to a pivot table. Will your data be laid out in a column or will it be laid out in a row? I'll give you an example by placing my hospital in a row. Then I will add the count of hospital in the value section. This gives me 3,701. Now I will also do the same with ICU, and then I will go ahead and also add ICU to my count. Now this is telling Excel that I would like a count of my hospital and a count of my ICU. And as you can see, my information is laid out in the row. Now if I drag this up to the column, my information will then be set up as a column as opposed to a row. And you get a different layout. So here's where you will decide the best structure for your data. What makes more sense, columns and rows? So looking at the two examples that I just provided, I believe that the rows make more sense. So I'm going to go ahead and put that back. Okay, Now you can also add a filter. So I'm going to add a filter notifying Excel that I would only like to display the count of the individuals who have suffered from other illnesses. So I'm going to select other illnesses, but I'm going to drag it to my filter. Okay, so now as you look above, you will see a filter has appeared on row number 2. I'm going to go ahead and get my drop down, and I'm going to say yes. Now I'm going to say okay, and my number has gone from 3,701 to 534. And it's just that easy to sort and filter your data and to get the numbers that you're looking for in a pivot table. Okay, and then you can just go ahead and uncheck your categories to go ahead and clear the table. Okay, now I would like to take a look at our layout options. So let's head over to the pivot table fields. Let's get this drop down next to the gear. Okay, so if you look through these options, these are some of the options that's available for your setup when you would like to go ahead and insert your columns and values. Right now, we have it on field section and area section stacked. Okay, so another option is field section and area section side by side. You have the option to do field sections alone, area section only 2 by 2. Okay, and then we can also do area section only 1 by 4. Okay, so those are some of your options that I would like to point out. Okay, so now let's go ahead and give this pivot table a name. Again, let's head into our ribbon under the file name. Let's go ahead and select our text box, and we'll just call this pivot 2. All right. Okay, I'd like to show you one more way to insert a pivot table, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up the lesson. Let's go ahead and insert a blank sheet. Let's hit the plus sign at the bottom of your tabs. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead up to insert. I'm going to click pivot table. I'm going to go ahead and select the arrow for data range. And then I'm going to head over to my basics tab, and I'm just going to go ahead and select the range of my data. And then I'm just going to go ahead and click the arrow, and I'm going to go ahead and say okay. Okay, so this takes me back to the sheet that I inserted. Now you're looking at another blank pivot table. Okay, now with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap the lesson up. We'll move into the function of the pivot table in our next lesson. You do not need to save the steps that we took today. So thank you for joining. I hope you found this foundational information helpful, and I will see you in the next video. Congratulations on completing another video and on your commitment to learning this program. I hope that you are getting the most out of our level up lessons, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next video.